President Donald Trump announced he has spoken to Lopez Obrador. The two discussed border security and the North American Free Trade Agreement, along with a possible separate trade deal between Mexico and the United States. Trump said he believed the new Mexican leader would help the United States with its border issue.
And I will say that I just spoke with the President-elect of Mexico. We had a great conversation, about a half an hour long. We talked about border security, we talked about trade, we talked about NAFTA, we talked about a separate deal, just Mexico and the United States. We had a lot of good conversation. I think the relationship would be a very good one. We'll see what happens, but I really do believe it's going to be a very good one. He had a very excellent election, did, I would say, even better than anticipated. I told him a number of years ago when I saw him campaigning for a different race, frankly, a different year, a different race, I said someday he's going to be the president of Mexico. So he remembered that, and it turned out to be correct. We had a great talk.
And Lopez Obrador in turn confirmed on Twitter that he has spoken with Trump over the phone and offered to reduce U.S.-bound migration in exchange for U.S. assistance. The tweet reads, "I received a phone call from Donald Trump and we spoke for half an hour. I proposed exploring a universal deal involving development projects that would create jobs in Mexico and by doing so reduce migration and improve security. We were respectful to one another and our representatives talked." Meanwhile, Mexicans in the United States celebrated López Obrador's victory. Supporters of the president-elect gathered in front of the Mexican consulate in Los Angeles, waving Mexican and Morena party flags. They said to have great hopes for the new administration and the policies promoted by López Obrador. They are positive he will defend Mexico and their citizens against the measures of President Donald Trump's administration.
We had to leave our country because we had to escape violence or economic problems. With the change he's going to bring, immigration will stop. That's the most important thing. We will be able to decide if we stay here or go back to our country.
From now on, Donald Trump will have to calm down because he will not have a Peña Nieto in front of him. This time, there will be an honest gentleman in the chair. And he is president because the people put him there.
We spoke to political analyst Alexander Main, Director of International Policy at the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, about López Obrador and his possible stand on foreign policy after he takes office.
López Obrador has been rather quiet on the foreign policy front and has often said that he really wants to focus on Mexico and that the best foreign policy is sort of focusing internally on improving the lot of the Mexican people. But he's also sent out some, I think, very strong signals, and particularly in recent speeches. Last week he spoke against hegemony. So that was a clear reference to the U.S. And I think particularly the U.S.'s involvement, throughout the region. And of course, the U.S. has been very involved in regime change in Latin America. And also he sent out a very sharp message about the importance of non-intervention and sticking to this principle. So that, I think, is also a break. I think that signifies a break with the sort of foreign policy that we've seen from Mexico for many years now that's been very much aligned with U.S. interests in the region.
A victory by López Obrador was widely expected, but the scale of his triumph shows just how much Mexicans are anxious for change. Paulo Pérez reports from Mexico City.
By a landslide, that's how everybody is describing Andrés Manuel López Obrador's virtual victory in yesterday's elections. And there are some interesting numbers to be seen now that the preliminary results program has advanced to over 50% of all the voting station accounted for, and it means that it shows that Andrés Manuel has an advantage, having over 53% of the votes, which is something that is unheard of. And so far, it seems that he will have a majority in both chambers of the Congress, and also the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, the PRI, Revolutionary Institutional Party, the party that held the power for over 80 years, was voted against by 3 out of 4 Mexican, which give us a show of how tired and endangered the Mexicans feel with the Enrique Peña Nieto's regime.
Lopez from Mexico City. Teachers in Argentina are beginning a 24-hour strike to protest against the repression of their protests in several parts of the country. The teachers' unions plan to march to the Ministry of Education in Buenos Aires. They say the police attacked them with rubber bullets and tear gas in the provinces of Chubut and Corrientes last week as they campaign for a wage increase. The teachers blame the regional governor for applying cuts demanded by the IMF. Union representatives and workers from the Argentinian state news agency TELAM are also protesting massive layoffs in the company. The protesters have criticized the government's decision to sack hundreds of their colleagues and call for an ongoing strike. Journalists say President Mauricio Macri has promoted an ideological cleansing against their colleagues. The government has dismissed 357 people from TELAM, almost half of the news agency workforce. The government has said this is part of the company's restructuring plan.
We believe this is a conflict that hinges on this economic moment. The public isn't willing to support this fierce adjustment. We are the first to be fired following the agreement with the IMF.
Let's hear from our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, with the latest.
Workers at Telam State News Agency continue to protest after the dismissal of 357 employees. The ongoing demonstrations intend to pressure the government of Mauricio Macri to revert its decision and to give these workers their jobs back. During a press conference, the workers said they are planning to take a bill to Congress to propose the government doesn't handle the news agency anymore. They have also announced another demonstration next Thursday that will go from Congress to the offices of the Media and Public Information Minister, Hernán Lombardi, to show him the rejection of the situation. Several political forces will take part, social and human rights organizations, as well as groups associated with culture and journalism. So it is expected to be very big. They also confirmed that the peaceful takeover will continue until the workers from the national news agency, TELAM, get their jobs back.
Edgardo Esteban from Buenos Aires. Former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa appeared at the Ecuadorian consulate in Belgium after he was accused of having links to an alleged abduction of a former lawmaker. Correa says this is part of a political persecution.
Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa appeared before Ecuador's consulate general in Belgium, where Rafael Correa currently lives, in order to comply with the precautionary measure requested by the judge Daniela Camacho after being linked to the payment for the alleged kidnapping of ex-lawmaker Fernando Balda, which took place in Bogotá in 2012. Correa's supporters have said that it is a political persecution.
We are talking about a prosecutor who is accusing and trying to involve Rafael Correa in a criminal proceeding. A prosecutor that hasn't been sworn in, an interim prosecutor, which is a position that doesn't exist in our law. Therefore, there is nothing legal in this case and it has to be dismissed.
According to the judge's decision, Rafael Correa must present himself every 15 days to the General Secretary of the National Court of Justice. In response, former President Rafael Correa denied any connection with the Balda case and said that there is no evidence of his alleged involvement in these events and that he is being subjected to political and media persecution. The judge's decision has generated mixed reaction.
With his presence in the consulate, the requirements are met. I think demanding that someone travel across the world to appear in court for 3 minutes doesn't make much sense.
Balda's defense team has accused Correa of being the mastermind behind the alleged kidnapping, and his lawyer has said that he will request a preventive detention if Rafael Correa fails to comply with the requirement to appear in the court in Quito.
I insist that preventive detention cannot be used as a way of anticipating a guilty verdict.
Balda was charged for conspiring against the government. In October 2012, Balda was deported from Colombia because he had been in the country without sufficient documentation. and then he was deported to face one of the charges against him. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. In Argentina, the economic crisis has hit businesses hard as consumers have cut back on spending. Huge inflation has overwhelmed citizens as their wages are not increasing, a blow to small traders and the country's economy. People are also worried about the increase in the cost of public services. In April, the sharp fall in the peso, the national currency, against the dollar, pushed the government to return to the International Monetary Fund for a loan, the largest in its history.
I spent whole days sitting at the hair salon without any work. Inflation brings all of that. It brings anguish and fear.
I try to update the price of the products, but I also have to somehow absorb the cost because I can't totally update the price as I would have to sell at a higher price than I am right now, and that will make me lose customers.
The dispute between El Alto Public University and the Bolivian government continues. However, talks are now set to resume. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, brings us the latest.
Government authorities and representatives from El Alto State University restarted negotiations on Sunday to try to agree on demands of the university for a bigger budget. The main topic of the debate is how the budget and the subsidy are being used and on what they will spend the money that they are demanding. This is why the government insists on doing audits that will make clear how the funds will be allocated. President Evo Morales took the situation in a press conference. He said that he feels disappointed with the academic results from El Alto University, which was created 18 years ago. He said that he dreamed about this university becoming a great institution that developed young professionals, but that the reality looks different. This is why the president has proposed the idea of refounding the university with the El Alto community and participation of its social organizations. Meanwhile, the negotiations will restart in the city of La Paz. The conflict began in the middle of May with blockades and a hold on activities in the cities of La Paz and El Alto.
Social movements in Panama are questioning the legal case against former President Ricardo Martinelli, since many of the accusations against him haven't been accepted in court.
While the Supreme Court continues to hold audiences in the trial of former President Ricardo Martinelli, Panamanian social leaders dismiss the possibility of any outcome that may serve justice.
This is a media circus. Everything is just for show, just to make the people think that an investigation is going on. It's simply a ploy to allow the ongoing violations of human rights, to allow corruption and social inequality.
While the former president has been accused of numerous cases of embezzlement, today he's only being tried for the use of $13.4 million to spy on over 150 opposition members.
Justice is not being done. He's been tried for only one of his many crimes. There's also the massacres in Changuinola, Colón, and San Felix, among many scandals about mismanagement of government funds.
Accusations for these massacres presented by social movements are not part of the prosecution's case against Martinelli.
No one from the previous government has been accused for these crimes. For all the dead, there will be no justice for the families because none of the complaints we presented were given due process. On the contrary, they were archived and no one is going to answer for them.
Social movements said that Martinelli represents a system that can only be changed with a complete restructuring of the whole country, which can only begin with the creation of a new constitution.
The CARICOM heads of government are set to meet in Montego Bay, Jamaica on Wednesday. Leaders are expected to discuss the CARICOM single market and economy and disaster resilience. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and Chilean President Sebastián Piñera will attend the conference. Jamaica's Prime Minister was named the chair of the regional body.
President Piñera is no stranger to us in our community since he interacted with our heads, I think, in 2012. And the newly elected President Díaz-Canel, of course, only having been sworn in as president, will be interacting with our heads of government for the first time, although Cuba is no stranger to interacting with our Caribbean community.
Jamaican Secretary General Irwin LaRocque said marijuana use can be recreational and medicinal, although he explains why this can be more of a challenge. Caribbean leaders are expected to discuss marijuana use at their meeting.
Certainly, the Commission encourages, in addition to decriminalization of marijuana, freeing up marijuana for scientific purposes, for medical use. Within that context, I would imagine that one could allow for trade in medicinal marijuana. And there's a distinction to be made. In the international law governed by various, starting with the UN, there's a protocol of the UN, would preclude, at this point in time, the trade of recreational marijuana. Even within the United States, for instance, you can't move marijuana from those states who have legalized it into those states who have not, unless it's medical marijuana.
St. Lucia and Grenada have agreed to help subsidize the operations of the Caribbean airline LIAT. Antigua's Prime Minister Gaston Brown made the announcement saying that the two governments have agreed to contribute funds to the regional airline. This means they will join Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who are the airline's primary shareholders. Intra-Caribbean travel has long been a concern and will be discussed during this week's meeting of the CARICOM heads of government in Jamaica. UNESCO has declared the Mexican valley of Tehuacan, Cuicatlan, a World Heritage Site. Located in the Mexican states of Puebla and Oaxaca, the valley has 145,000 hectares and is the refuge of 140 species of birds, some of them endangered wildlife. It also houses cave paintings, cemeteries, mounds, and buildings. In the Nahuatl indigenous language, Tehuacan means place of gods, while Cuicatlan means land that sings. Female Brazilian journalists have launched a campaign against harassment in response to the complaints reported during the World Cup in Russia. With the hashtag #LetHerWork, over 50 journalists, presenters, reporters, and producers covering sports have joined the initiative. The campaign was first launched in March and has now been used to expose the aggressions that female journalists have been exposed to in Russia while covering the World Cup. Different videos have circulated on social media showing fans harassing female reporters. Colombian footballer Jerry Mina has become a star in his country and a role model in his birthplace of Cauca, one of the areas most affected by the country's internal conflict. Mina is one of the top players in Colombia's national football team, but the start of his career was not easy. 23-year-old Mina was born in a humble home in Huachene, an Afro-Colombian community, which, like other municipalities in northern Cauca, was coveted by different armed groups. Mina has become a role model for kids playing on makeshift soccer fields.
All kids today say, I want to be a football player. Jerry has crossed borders, has played a big role. He's doing well abroad, and today he's a world figure. And in the near future, we will have many Jerry Minas here in Huachene.
Parents sometimes didn't have enough money to pay for the ride to go and train in Cali, to pay football trainers or to buy equipment. When you find yourself in the middle of all that difficulty, you need to have a strong will to become a big star in football.
We'll take one last short break, but join us again after another video from our multimedia team.
When someone looks at me, the bias would be to not take me seriously until I open my mouth.
Thanks for joining us again. The 12 members of a youth football team and their coach have been found alive inside a flooded cave in Thailand, and a medical team has just reached them to assess their health 10 days after they went missing. In a miraculous turn of events, British rescue divers found the group 2 kilometers into the cave on Monday. The boys seemed to be disoriented as they were approached by the divers. The Thai Navy said they are all in good health, but they still do not know how to rescue them from deep inside the cave. Several options are being explored, and it may take weeks or months before the football team can be safely rescued. The ongoing rainy season has made search and rescue efforts excruciating.
We need to be careful not to rush. As long as the children are safe and strong, then they are in good hands. We can now reach and communicate with them, so they are in our sights.
The European Union has warned of a global retaliation against US President Donald Trump if he implements punitive tariffs on car imports from Europe. The EU responded in writing to the US Department of Commerce, saying that the announced tariffs will not be healthy for either side and would affect $300 billion worth of US products. Last month, the United States imposed tariffs on European steel and aluminum imports and is conducted another national security study that could lead to tariffs on vehicles and auto parts. Former Malaysian Prime Minister has been taken into custody over graft charges. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines around the world.
Former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has been arrested by anti-corruption authorities following a probe into missing state funds. The authorities are investigating how over $10 million went from a state fund he created in 2009 to his own personal account. These graft allegations also cost Razak the elections in May, in which he lost to 92-year-old Mahathir Mohamad. After intense negotiations, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has reached a deal on migration with her rebellious Interior Minister Horst Seehofer. It's a close save for her government, as Seehofer had threatened to quit Merkel's coalition. Their disagreement is stemmed over setting up of holding and processing centers for asylum seekers near German borders.
This solid agreement, which corresponds to my ideals, allows me to remain as a Federal Minister of the Interior, Public Works and Homeland.
The Archbishop of Adelaide in Australia has been sentenced to a year in detention for concealing child sexual abuse by a priest in 1976. 67-year-old Philip Wilson is the most senior Catholic clerk in the world to be convicted of concealing child sexual misconduct. He will be taken back to court next month for a decision on where he will serve his sentence.
And before we finish our show, a short reminder that you can watch our special World Cup program with Argentina football star Diego Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup, according to Maradona, will air only on Telesur every night during the tournament in Russia. These are the times to watch it, so don't miss out. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories, as you know, you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla González. Thank you for watching.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from